So I'm in the midst of creating a top 10 list of movies for this year. I don't currently have 10, but on that list are Top Gun Maverick, The Northman, RRR, and The Black Phone. This is an incredible horror movie, and I'll say this, that Scott Derrickson, who is the director of this film, and he co-wrote it.
Yes.
He co-wrote it with a guy, C. Robert Cargill. C. Robert Cargill's name might be familiar to you. He used to write for Ain't It Cool News, and he's a screenwriter from Austin, Texas. Co-wrote the script with Scott Derrickson. And Scott Derrickson, the director of Doctor Strange, I think Scott dodged a bullet by not directing Doctor Strange 2. I think he dodged a bullet. The Black Phone is incredible as a horror film. I think the best horror films for me are ones that deal with real life terror, real life horror. I'm fond of saying, I probably said this before, but I like to say that Quentin Tarantino movies are all monster movies where the monsters are people, right? They're the characters themselves are the monsters in Tarantino movies. And this is about a real world monster who abducts children, young kids, locks them in a basement and with very little resources, and sort of builds up to the point where this monster is going to murder a child. Okay. I don't want to get into too many details of the story. We'll consider this a sort of initial reaction, because the movie's not out yet. We saw an earlier screening, which was available to the public. If you're an AMC A-list member, they have this thing that says investor screening, and they don't even tell you what the movie is until you buy the tickets, and then you can. It's really cool. So anyone can see it. I was in a packed, nearly 100% full audience, and this movie is terrifying. So it's set in the 70s, and it is about this kid and his. Well, Alan, why don't you go through the story real quickly?
Yeah,
I need to bring something up.
I mean, again, I think this is another great example of how you tell a story. But it's about this kid named Finn who is kind of bullied at school. He has an abusive father. He has a sister as well who's oh my gosh. Okay, I'll talk about them later. But
yeah, go ahead.
He gets abducted by basically a serial killer played by Ethan Hawke, and this is all in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling a lot. But when he's in this kind of soundproof dungeon, there's a phone that doesn't work, and he gets calls from Ethan Hawke's past victims on how they tried to escape, and it's just again, this is the horror movies that I like are the ones that have a clever story behind it. That is not horror for horror's sake. That there's a puzzle here that has to be solved, and this kid has to solve it in extraordinary ways. And again, there's a lot of setup before he ultimately gets abducted, but all that does is it sets up his character, and by setting up his character, we become emotionally invested in his safety and the outcome of this film. And again, we went 2 hours about Kenobi about this, which does none of that. You have to write stories that allows the audience to engage, to put yourself in the shoes of your protagonist, and then now you're engaged throughout the whole movie and you're invested as to the outcome. And that's where that's good storytelling. That's good basic storytelling, and Black Phone has it from top to bottom. I will say this: Finn, who's played by Mason Thames, and Madeleine McGraw, there's a moment where they're both crying in separate situations, and I swear they cry like real children. It's not a Hollywood cry. I mean, I'm like, this is how my kid cries. Well, and I was just blown away by how authentic this was.
It was, I was blown away by that. And to me, this is the best cast, the whole cast. I'm talking about, the cast of kids, and they're kids at that age, right? This is this has to be like junior high, right?
Yeah. I think it's I'm pretty
Early
sure
high school, but
I would
it's
say
like,
freshman. Yeah.
yeah,
Freshman.
like freshman year high school, like junior high-ish era. Like these kids are that age. They're the correct age. They look their age. This is the best cast of young actors since Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Like this cast is amazing. They're so good in this. And like you could, okay, in the screening I was at, which was 100% full, this is not a movie for kids. I saw a mother with her young child walk out of the screening.
Yeah.
It was so horrific. And you could hear a pin drop. And what I love about the movie is, one, the use of music. There's a needle drop of like a Pink Floyd song that is so perfect. I haven't heard that song in a long time. And and also this was my childhood in the sense that that's kind of the era that I grew up in. With it was like, you know, the 70s and 80s is when I was a kid. And so seeing this portrayed so accurately on screen was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that was horrific about it was not just the use of sound, the sound design and music, but the lack of music.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments where the movie is just quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And there aren't any, when there are scares in the movie, of course, but they're not cheap scares. They're not cheap scares. And you see how this serial killer kind of conducts himself. He has a certain method of doing this so that he doesn't get caught, and it's frightening. Why? Because it's way too real. Let me tell you how real. When I was a kid growing up in Royal Oak, Michigan, there was the Oakland County child killer. And blocks away from where I lived, there was a boy that was my age. At the time he was abducted, his name was Timothy King. And you can see him. This is I just Googled somebody's blog. This is retrokimmer.com. You can look up retrokimmer.com. And she wrote a blog post about this because this was a cold case. They never caught this guy. This terrified me as a kid. When I was a kid, I learned to read at a really young age. And then I would read the newspaper. Why was I reading the newspaper as a kid? Well, mostly to find out what monster movies were on television. There was late night horror shows and whatnot. So I learned to read so I could win our monster movies on, right? But then I'd begin to read articles and news. This Oakland County child killer terrified Oakland County and the Royal Oak, Metro Detroit area where I lived, where I grew up as a kid. This kid, Timothy King, lived 3 blocks from me in Berkeley, Michigan, right around the corner from the Berkeley movie theater, which is now a drugstore if you go back to Michigan. I was horrified. I read all the details about it. My sister, who was younger than me at the time, we were typical. We were latchkey kids. We walked to school. Seeing this movie brought back all these memories of that era. And I remember teaching my sister. I taught my sister how to if someone tries to grab you, kick them in the balls, grab them in the balls. I tried to actually teach my sister little methods of self-defense because she was younger than me. We didn't always walk home together from school. And that was just, you walked home at school, you kept your screen door unlocked. It was a different time. And details stood out to me when I was a kid reading about it, that the car that was always spotted where these kids were abducted, the car was a blue Gremlin with a white hockey stripe. You can kind of see it there, just below the photos of the children. And they would just find these bodies of the kids dumped naked in a field. These bodies of these kids. And I remember the gruesome detail that terrified me, that to this day I never forgot, was that Timothy King, when they did the autopsy on him, he had a banquet frozen chicken pot pie dinner as his last meal. And I used to eat those up when I was a kid. I mean, had them probably a couple times a week. I lived on those. And there were so many similarities between the two of us. I mean, you're looking at this photo of Timothy King. That might as well have been a photo of me because it's kind of what I looked like, as an awkward preteen growing up. So to just see his story play out from the abduction to the disappearance, to the searching, to the details, the blue gremlin, all this stuff, it was horrific. And seeing this movie, The Black Phone, just completely brought back all of those memories. You could go down a rabbit hole. This is one of those cold cases that later they think they solved. And we don't have time really to go into it now, but I'll just say that The Black Phone, the terror in this is this real terror. The fantasy version is him kind of talking to the children who were murdered in the basement before, but I cannot recommend this movie enough. On my top 10 list of the year, I just kind of, I've got maybe 5 movies on my top 10 list. This is on it. I plan to see the movie again, and we'll do a deeper dive interview, but that's my preview of it with no spoilers. I think when we do a second review, this is our non-spoiler review. We'll do a spoiler review later, but I want to hear your impressions, because first of all, this is a real thing that continues to happen today. Children get abducted and are put through horrible things. And now you're seeing this from the point of view of the child going through this experience. That theater, and people walked out, and you know when a movie's good, here's when I know a movie is good with a mainstream audience, is when they see the movie and they don't leave. Not only do they not leave, the credits, they go outside and they stand around like outside the movie theater to talk about the movie, because you have to debrief the experience. And that's what everybody did watching The Black Phone. Alan, what are your impressions?
Yeah, wow. I'm not as connected to it as you were, but I'm definitely, it was, I just mentioned it. You talk about a parent having to leave with their child. I mean, it's as visceral as it gets in terms of a child being abducted, and then giving, and then what that child is like. I don't know that we truly know what it's like being abducted, but it's pretty close, and it is scary. And I would imagine that kid now has nightmares going on for the next few years in his or her life. But yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on it. This is, I like the fact that this is probably not going to be a franchise. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but I like the fact that it is a self-contained story, and that such great attention was paid to. I think the best movies are the ones that can orchestrate our feelings. That gets us into the melody of a song, and then moves us along the path of this song, and just manipulating our emotions and our feelings along the way. And this is a classic example of one of those. And like I said, I do like the cleverness of the conceit of the story, which is this phone and the calls the kid gets from the ghost, and how that plays itself out.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of saw it coming, but I enjoyed how it played out at the end to the final moment.
It's so, I mean, it's so harrowing. I can't emphasize it enough, but I don't see this as a franchise. If they try to make it, I don't think that Scott Derrickson would be involved. He'd be smart to not be involved.
Yeah.
You could see how they could make it, because Ethan Hawke has this horrific mask, but I cannot recommend this movie enough. I'm sure advance tickets are on sale for when it opens. I think it opens later this month. I plan to see it again, and we'll do a more extensive spoiler review, but it is on my top 10 list for the year, and I'm blown away by it. So cannot recommend it enough.